years ago, and I was told by a lot of people, don't go into the Moscow subway by yourself because, you'll get into trouble and this, that, and the other. And I said, hey, you know what? I'm South African. Nothing is going to beat me. So I went into that subway because I wanted to explore the outer areas of Moscow. And the subway in Moscow is quite unique. So you've got three circles. The one inner circle, which is really the one that takes you downtown within the city center. And then you have the outer ring. So let's assume it'll take you up to Midrand. And then you have the furthest, which will take you Pretoria and out. And then you have a line that crosses in between. He said to me, just be careful, don't get into that in between, because then that takes you completely out. You're going to find yourself in Mapigeng, for example, if you get onto that line. Everything is written in Russian, nothing in English. So lo and behold, Neville goes, does his thing. I thought, I'm on the right track. And then I get onto the one. Now I'm trying to look at the writing and the characters to see if everything matches. Nothing matches what I thought it would. The long and short of it is I get to one station. I'm trying to ask everyone speaking Russian. Wow, 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 wow. Okay, I'm clearly very lost here. And then somebody taps me on the shoulder and said, are you lost, sir? I said, yes. I turn and look, it's a gentleman there, and he says to me, okay, let me help you. And as I start speaking to him, he turns around and says, South African? I said, yes. Lo and behold, he was a South African gentleman. So even in the outskirts of Moscow, I found myself with a South African there. So thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, our partners, Mail and Guardian, represented by the chairman, thank you very much for your partnership this morning. Esteemed colleagues, academics, fellow South Africans, good morning. This past weekend, we celebrated Human Rights Day in South Africa, a day which holds immense significance as it honors the lives lost in the Sharpeville massacre in 1960, when police opened fire on peaceful protesters demanding their basic human rights under the apartheid laws. This tragic event was a pivotal moment in their struggle against apartheid and marked a turning point in the fight for human dignity and equality in South Africa. Human Rights Day reminded us of the injustices faced by millions of South Africans during the apartheid era and underscores the importance of protecting and promoting human rights for all people, regardless of their background. We observe it because this day reflects on the sacrifices made by so many who stood up for justice and fundamental freedoms that we continue to enjoy today. Human rights is a time to celebrate the achievements of South Africa's post-apartheid transformation and its commitment to ensuring that human rights are enshrined in our constitution. Today, at the back of that celebration of Human Rights Day, marks a significant milestone for us as Brand South Africa. We unveil today the 24-25 edition of the State of the Nation Brand Report. This report, in its 8th edition, I'm made to believe, serves as Brand South Africa's flagship domestic perception study, offering an invaluable insight into experiences, perceptions, and aspirations of our people. We gather here today not only to present the report, but to reflect on the progress we have made as a nation and to chart a course towards a brighter and more unified future. The findings that will be tabled shortly in this report offer empirical data that mirrors the lived realities of South Africans, showcasing the work we have done and the work that still lies ahead to build a more inclusive, cohesive, and global recognized nation. Conducting this brand survey is essential for Brand South Africa because it provides valuable insights into the public perception of the nation's identity, values, and progress. By gathering diverse opinions, the survey helps policymakers, businesses, and civil society understand the sentiments, needs, and expectations of the population, which can inform more effective decision-making, tailored public policies, and strategies for national growth. Moreover, it fosters a sense of engagement and inclusivity as citizens feel their voices are heard in shaping the future of our country. In addition to shaping domestic policy, this survey is critical in enhancing a nation's reputation on the global stage. The perception of our people as a country's most authentic representatives plays a crucial role in shaping how the nation is viewed by the international community. And I pause to say, for us as Brand South Africa, those responses actually inform how we get to position the brand, which is South Africa, in the global markets. A positive nation image rooted in the collective identity of its citizens helps strengthen diplomatic ties, attract foreign investment, and improve the country's standing in global indices. And we're also able to weather some flu that is coming from the West. Furthermore, by monitoring changes in public perception over time, such surveys allow for the evaluation of long-term policies, ensuring that the nation's progress aligns with its core values and aspirations for sustainable development and social cohesion. At the heart of this report lies the empirical data that represents the voices of South Africans from all walks. It is a reflection of our country's soul, diverse yet unified by a shared history and a common future. This data is not just a set of statistics, it is the key to understanding how we as South Africans perceive ourselves and each other. It allows us to gauge how far, and it provides critical challenges we still face in building a society that is truly inclusive. The launch of this report is designed to offer us not only a snapshot of where we are, but also to serve as a powerful tool for guiding policies and decision-making. By deeply understanding the perceptions of our people, we can ensure that the work of Brand South Africa, our government, businesses, and the civil society is aligned to the needs of the population. The theme of this report resonates strongly with the social cohesion, nation pride, and active citizenship, all of which are fundamental pillars for building a united South Africa. Through the data gathered, we see clear signs of progress in these areas. For instance, the National Social Cohesion Index has risen to 6.7%, a clear indication of the growing unity and inclusivity that defines our nation today. This increase signals that we are steadily moving towards a society where differences are embraced rather than used to divide us. The Government of National Unity remains a living example of how this diversity can be harnessed to create a unified and harmonious society. It is through our collective effort, through the work of our government and the commitment of our citizens that we continue to build South Africa's reputation globally. Critically for us this year in particular, aligning national sentiments with the G20 presidency theme was quite critical for the report. In this year's report, we find our national sentiments in the alignment of the G20 presidency, particularly the theme, solidarity, equality, and sustainable development. Solidarity reflects the strength we draw from working together. Equality ensures that every South African has an opportunity to strive, and sustainable development guarantees that our growth is long-lasting and benefits all members of our society. As a nation, we must position ourselves as global leaders who embody these principles in both action and spirit. Through this alignment, we show the world that South Africa is committed to the values that underpin the work of the G20 and a brighter future for all. The report also highlights the public support for the government programs that are contributing to inclusive growth, such as the EPWP and NSFAS. Over 60% of South Africans support these initiatives, reflecting their importance in our society. One of the most powerful findings from the report is the shared South African identity that transcends race, language, gender, and ethnicity. 53% of the respondents primarily identify as South Africans, Kathy, above any other group. Still quite low, because we need to really embrace our brand, love our brand, and really nurture it. This sense of shared identity not only fuels national pride, but it also lays the foundation for the resilience and social cohesion. The G20's theme, solidarity, equality, and sustainable development, are deeply rooted in the nation's identity, which is why they resonate so strong with us. Together, we can create a South Africa that is not only recognized for its progress and achievements, but also for its commitment to a future that is fair, equal, and sustainable for all. As we move forward, it is essential that we see this report merely as a document of reflection, but a call to action. We must use this data to inform our strategies, actions in policy, planning, governance, and development. And I must indicate, as Brand South Africa, we are going to do exactly that. And we will be taking this report to other provinces as well. We urge all stakeholders, government, business, and civil society to leverage the findings of this report to continue advancing the goals of inclusive growth, social cohesion, and sustainable development. As I conclude, I want to highlight the following. Over the past 2 years, several South Africans have achieved significant international recognition across various fields. Here are just 5 noticeable individuals. Tyler, at the age of 23, Tyler became a global music sensation with her 2023 hit Water, which amazed over 10 billion TikTok viewers. She won a Grammy for the Best African Music Performer and released a debut album with over 1.5 billion streams. I attended her concert, by the way, in December with my children. And when I told a colleague of mine that I'm attending the Tyler concert, he says, "You, Tyler concert, what the hell are you doing there?" Well, if you don't support our very own, you can't expect everyone else to support them. The second one, Gosnath Mapumulo, aka Black Coffee. In October 2023, DJ Black Coffee made history as the first South African artist to headline New York City's Madison Square Gardens. His international acclaim continues to rise. And I must indicate that my friend Lyndon is here, and we've been attending a number of Black Coffee's fundraising events in the last 3 weeks. He started in Cape Town and he's taking them across. And you see the passion in wanting to reinvest and redevelop our very own. His passion and what I have witnessed literally in the last 3 weeks on what he is doing to try and build an academy in South Africa truly resonates with somebody who's passionate and who loves South Africa. Peter Steph du Toit, in November 2024, was named World Rugby Player of the Year for the 2nd time, becoming the first South African to achieve this honor twice. Thuso Mbedu, after sharing in the Hollywood film The Woman King, Mbedu joined L'Oreal Paris as as an international brand ambassador in 2024, alongside global stars like Gemma Chen and Anushka Sharma. I can't forget our very own Trevor Noah, who's continued to build global fame, especially after stepping down from the Daily Show in the US, and has really continued to become a global sensation. There are a number of South Africans like these who really continue to refer back and give back to South Africa. I mean, quite a few, Rosi Tembagwayo, you name them. They are all out there, and really embracing their success really becomes our success. Finally, let us promote continued collaboration across government, civil society, and business to ensure that South Africa's leadership on the global stage is both recognized and respected. We're not just a nation, we are a movement, one that is advancing toward the realization of our goals as outlined in the National Development Plan and African Union's Agenda 2063 for building the Africa that we want. Together, we can achieve more as South Africans, but we can achieve even more, embracing our Africanness and celebrating the fact that we are African, our dreams, our continent, united, equitable, and sustainable. I thank you.
Against the backdrop of a new dawn, a nation stood united, casting shadows of resilience upon the canvas of destiny. Ekuqaleni kwenkululeko nolawulo lwentando lwesininzi, ndaphefumla okokuqala umama wandiphehlelela ngegama elinguzozibini Thunzi.
We will not stop now. You hold the future in your hand.
Bound by a dream of freedom, we embarked on a journey of hope and reconciliation. Together, we celebrated triumphs that echoed across the globe. Where colors dance and stories run, South African artists weave their tales. Our voices rise forevermore. Innovation blooms in South Africa's journey. From technology's forefront to automotive mastery, pioneering breakthroughs and nurturing minds. Our legacy. Driven by the spirit of possibility, we have built a nation where dreams take flight and bridges crumble barriers. In the face of injustice, we stand tall, unyielding voices echoing the call for humanity and equal rights. For 30 years, our flag has been a symbol of unity, resilience, and hope. Celebrating 30 years of democracy. This is South Africa. We are still moving forward. South Africa.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lipencho Nokane, the General Manager of Research at Brand South Africa. Let me start by thanking each and every single one of you for making it this morning. I understand that traffic was hectic. I'm glad that you all have made it. And it's deeply meaningful to launch this study here at Constitutional Hill this morning. We all know a lot of our leaders were incarcerated here, like so Tata Mandela, greats such as Mahatma Gandhi, also Mama Winnie Madikizela, at the very same time also Mama Albertina Sisulu. Them being present here today is part of our heritage as a people. This is what has defined us as a people, and today this study basically seeks to shine, as the CEO has already alluded to, shine a spotlight just in terms of saying what defines us as a people or as South Africans. since I suppose the beginning of the year, there have been quite a lot said about us as a people. Only thing is not by us. And this study is a true reflection of the voices of our people. So just before we get into the insights, I just think it's quite important just to give a bit of background into this specific study. Our domestic perceptions program has got 3 pillars to it, right? We've got what we call the omnibus survey, which really is a population representative study. We got to all of the 9 provinces conducting field work in informal settlements, in our townships, and in every single crevice or corner where we can find our people. With that, we garner insights from our citizens, specifically around, as the CEO has already mentioned, around 3 constructs. That is around 1, social cohesion, how we as a people relate to one another, but at the very same time, how our citizens also relate with the state, which is very important. So the one, we define it as horizontal cohesion, the other one, vertical cohesion, the state, the citizen in relation to the state. To that then, obviously, the aspect of national pride. Right now, we've just heard some notable South Africans that are making a mark on the global stage. But it's not only in the field of arts and culture where South Africans are making a mark. In the space of innovation, when you're talking medicine or we're talking nuclear medicine, South Africa is making a mark there. In the academic field, our institutions are world-renowned. And these aspects, they come together to contribute to creating this one identity, or at least that's what we hope the result will tell us, to say this one identity that we can truly say that gives us that element of being proud of saying that we are South African. The other aspect also speaks to active citizenship. To what extent, as a South African, are you involved in making a difference in your community? Are you only relying on the state, or depending only on your family, or are you also leaning into your communities? And I think this we saw a lot of during the COVID period. You know, I don't need to even label that, but the dependency factor just increased that much, right? Where you were really just limited to your immediate circle or social circle and your immediate community. But at the very same time, I think also our government did well in terms of also supporting communities during the very, very harrowing experience. So that is the 3 constructs that we normally look into. To that, because these constructs are impacted by various aspects. I mean, even if you just had to reflect over the last 3 weeks, people are saying we are divided in terms of who we say we are and so forth. So to ensure that we are continuously keeping our finger on the pulse of what defines us as a people, we conduct monthly surveys. Again, these are online and they're also nationally representative, and really just trying to assess that whatever issues that are coming in the environment, to what extent are they basically causing a shift in terms of active citizenship, for instance, or even social cohesion. One needs only to speak to, for instance, the fault lines of 2021 in KZN, for instance, and to say then, does that, or was that a defining moment for us, or is that really a reflection of us as South Africa? And from there, so from that point, we would have assessed what would have happened at that point in time, and then at the very same time, taken the dipstick at a later point in time to see whether there's been a shift from that period. And I think the results will basically speak to themselves in terms of that. Then we also conduct focus groups periodically, right? Just to ensure that, you know, we're really getting the voice of the people and giving our communities, you know, a platform where they can basically give us their views in terms of what defines us as a country, but at the very same time also in terms of the challenges that are being experienced, and to a large extent also to assess Are we moving in the right direction in terms of some of the reforms that we are basically putting in place as a government and as a people? So just to give a brief background or breakdown of the demographic profile of, of the individuals or respondents that we basically sampled, right? As I mentioned, it's a population representative sample. So our sample size is around about 3,000, which obviously we then extrapolate to a national level. 28% in terms of provincial distribution coming from Gauteng, 18% KZN, Western Cape, 13%, right? And this, we are using the enumeration area from stats, Stats South Africa. To this, as I mentioned, we've got quite a comprehensive team of field workers. Jan, how many people were you using for field work? Around about 250. Really zigzagging, the length and breadth of the country for this study. Just in terms of the breakdown around race, 80% obviously would represent the population, 80% being African. To that, 9% colored, Indian, 3% whites, 9% in terms of gender breakdown, 52% being female, and 48% being a male. And again, this just gives a brief background just in terms of the age profile, most of them being above 16, mainly above 18 years of age, in terms of those that are basically sampled. Just in terms of the dependency on our social programs, right? So we've got those that are on social support. There we have 25% of them, they've got a SASSA card. 32% are paying income tax. And around about 20% are actually even willing to even pay increased tax. In light of the current budget, I suppose the minister needs to be speaking to this 3%. All right. Then just in terms of democracy, we've got about 49% of them saying, look, we've been better off since the dawn of democracy. So these are people that are really seeing progress, albeit that we still have challenges, but we're a nation that is basically moving forward. You also have about 59% that are saying our democracy is maturing. And I think this is really, that this for me is quite telling, especially when you see where we are or where we stand in the global arena, especially in this current year as the current G20 president. In terms of languages, I will not dive too much in terms of that, but there is a diverse representation there. 13% Afrikaans speaking, 11% English speaking, and then obviously there you've got Sotho languages represented by 26%, 45% being Nguni, and then obviously you've got other languages also being in there. So just coming out of the demographics as they've been defined, one of the critical questions that were asked, and as the CEO in his opening remarks has already mentioned, was to say, how do you define yourself, right? Do you define yourself according to your features, right? Let me mention pronouns. So yeah, what are your pronouns, for instance, right? Perhaps it's according to personal attributes. You know, I see myself as a loving person or a caring individual, for instance. Or perhaps it speaks to my state of being. You know, I define myself according to the freedoms that I enjoy or the liberty that this country affords me. What came out of this is that 53%, the first thing that they said was that I am South African and that is how I define myself. And I think that is very much important, especially in the current environment and with the current discourse that is basically playing out in media. To that, it is also followed by I'm an African. So I'm not a European South African, like that. Yeah, I am a South African. I'm not a Nigerian South African. I am South African. And I think this is very important. So post that, one of the other things that we asked our respondents was to say then, what is it that you value most about South Africa? And this is just some of the snippets or highlights that basically came out of the study. Tolerance and forgiveness. Despite hardships like corruption and service failures we've had in the past, and now we're seeing that reforms are being put in place, South Africa remains a peaceful and forgiving place. South Africans remain peaceful and forgiving. Our natural beauty always comes up. Doesn't matter where you go. Just the uniqueness in terms of the nature that we've been endowed. No other nation can look the way that our country looks. Cultural richness, unparalleled diversity in languages, customs, traditions, and also all of these being a source of pride and uniqueness to our nation. Humor as strength, and I think there's no other nation that laughs at itself, even when we're going through trials and tribulations. I'm quite certain that with the current discourse that's been taking place, we also saw how there's just been this, satirical play around how we've been portrayed, or people leading the country and so forth, right? That just speaks to who we are as South Africans. Inspiring sport achievements, and I mean, we've already touched on this. It's not only in sport, but really, we're a country that really punches above its own weight. The other aspect that really came out strongly was to say then, given the current environment, what are you thankful for, right, in the context of this country? Again, the ones that really come out quite strongly, unity, right? We always speak about our diversity and unity in diversity, and that still holds very much true. A sense of community, hope, right? Hope for the future, especially now with the establishment of the GNU. To that, resilience. And I think this resilience is one aspect that, we as South Africans understand more than anyone, right? Through the ages, through different epochs of this country's history. To that perseverance, I suppose that also speaks to resilience, and not resilience, but also our freedoms and our liberties. We really enjoy the democracy that we basically live in. Coming into the elections, I remember reading one study saying that, well, we are a troubled democracy. But I think, as coming out of this study and, people saying that we are a maturing democracy, there was no other or stronger display of maturity than coming out of the elections peacefully, without there being any bloodshed, where people were thinking that perhaps this country might be going down to the doldrums. In fact, we came out stronger to establish a framework of governance that our forefather, our founding father, for instance, and Nelson Mandela, established the GNU, that framework. And we're seeing it working, albeit that it still has its own challenges. And again, then we asked our respondents to reflect just on this journey of renewal, right? And it's one that is characterized by discontent and also hope. So let me touch on what discourages our respondents first, right? Again, aspects around poor service delivery, collapsing infrastructure came out strong. And I think we need to situate this. You must remember that this study obviously takes place between January of 2024 and right towards the end of 2024. So during that 12-month period where we were really working towards ameliorating some of the challenges that the country was basically facing. Load shedding, water issues, corruption, mismanagement, and distrust in leadership. Again, we're just coming into this GNU, not too sure as a people to say, will this GNU deliver, for me and my family, for instance. There's a sense of, there's political elitism and unfair hiring practices. Again, one does not need to speak to it. This has been labored quite a lot within in media. High taxes with little economic relief. This has received much resistance. We know, obviously, what some of the commentary that's come out with the budget. The minister obviously then giving us a 0.5 increase, but again, it's going to hit hard. But as a country, we believe that we shall overcome ultimately. Concerns for future generations. So again, I suppose this comes from an egalitarian perspective to say, if this is where we are, is this the country that we're going to bestow on future generations? So this really speaks to saying we can do better and we can do more as a country. Diminishing public trust due to unmet expectations. And I think right now that is being ameliorated by the fact that we're even starting to see government and business working together more closely. Chair, Business for South Africa, in terms of how businesses come on board, in terms of assisting with issues around the ports, assisting even in terms of issues around load shedding. So again, this is quite unique to South Africa in terms of seeing public sector and government working so closely to basically deal with some of the issues that we basically confronted with. So then just moving away from what discourages our people to what renews this hope that we are starting to see emerge post the elections of last year. Improved investor confidence. So via Operation Vulimkhela, structural reforms and ease of doing business. And we are seeing a lot of that starting to happen with the new visa regime, for instance. At the very same time, we're also starting to see the structural issues. I mean, yes, load shedding, I think, over the last 2 weeks, we had a bit of a kink. Before that, we were doing quite well in terms of, not having any kind of load shedding. The anti-corruption drive via the SIU, and also just the implementation of the Zondo Commission recommendations. Public service reform, professionalizing of the public service, youth-focused programs like YES, Youth Employment Service, and also just community action forums. And I think you saw a lot of these coming up post the COVID era, right? Where we had to depend on one another as communities more than ever. And then, community action. I think they're duplicated my bullets there. So the one thing that also started coming through is that there's this rebound in terms of trust in institutions, right? Previously, over the last couple of years, I'll say between 2022, 2023, you saw a sharp decline, right? In terms of trust, specifically even with the public sector. And with the establishment of the GNU, you're seeing it now improve from 55% to around about 63%. So that is quite, normally you'd expect a marginal improvement, but there's really hope that is basically being expressed by our people and confidence to say that a multi-party governance or cooperative governance framework, that might be the way that this country needs to move ahead. And this model might be the one for us, right? Private sector confidence, at the very same time, also coming out quite strongly. We're seeing it there sitting for 2024, sitting at around about 72%, coming up from 2023 from 66%. And again, I think this is being boosted also by private sector playing an active role in terms of supporting the developmental agenda and also assisting in terms of dealing with some of the challenges that we're experiencing as a country. Again, just delving deeper into the GNU, we just asked some basic questions around, one, awareness around the GNU, and then at the very same time to then say, please rate it. Do you see it delivering, in the current context? And again, remember, this is in the context of what? Around about 4 to 5 months of the GNU being in place. And then at the very same time, do you believe that the GNU will deliver in terms of solving some of your problems? And is the country moving in the right direction? 57% felt that yes, indeed, the country is moving in the right direction, right? And to that, they felt that yes, the problems that we are facing as a people, indeed, they will be solved through this framework. So I suppose this is a message again to the GNU from the people to say, you have to make it work, irrespective of whatever challenges that you're facing. And to that, in terms of rating of the performance, again, as I said, it's still early days. So they're sitting at around about 49%. The other question that we asked again was around, is South Africa an inspirational leader? We are a key player within the continent, but not only in the continent, but also globally. And just in terms of the top two boxes that you're seeing there, around about 76% felt that indeed the country is an inspirational leader, not only globally, but at the very same time on the continent. And this speaks specifically around the moral standing that, that we take as a country when it comes to global issues. So whether you're talking the ICJ, for instance, or whether you're talking our non-aligned stance when it comes to Russia, for instance, of hope and also an inspirational leader. So coming back to the three main constructs that this study basically delves into, right? What you will see in terms of, one, the social cohesion index, national pride index, and the active citizenship index, is that really it starts showing a picture, or they start showing a picture of a country that is moving out of a period where there was uncertainty and now there's basically renewed hope. Just to look at the National Social Cohesion Index, when we started measuring the National Social Cohesion Index in 2017, we were coming from a high of around about 72.5, right? And from there, from 2018, it hit an all-time low of around about 61.4. Gradually from 2019 to around about 2022, it really just went flat. And one needs to really emphasize that out of the main three constructs, social cohesion is the most difficult to basically try to move the needle with, right? Now, coming out of this period, in 2024, with the establishment of we are starting to see this renewed sense of collective purpose, right? There's a significant upswing, as you can see, from 62.8 in 20 to 65.7, right? Just in terms of what is now causing this movement, so to speak. So you've got about 5 clusters that we basically talk to. The most critical one is vertical cohesion. As I mentioned, again, the citizen in relation to the state. So here, this cluster, it's just a broad and strong reliance on government systems and programs for support and social security, right? So in terms of our respondents, about 20% of them fall into this cluster. And in terms of its weighting, in terms of contributing to moving this needle, it's around about 30% in terms of salience, right? The second one speaks to our people, those that are really equality driven, right? They're defined by a strong commitment to equality, fairness, and mutual support, right? So 18% of our respondents fall into this cluster. And in terms of salience or prominence, it's sitting at around about 25%. Then you've got horizontal cohesion, connecting with fellow South Africans, communities working together, supporting each other, and fostering solidarity at a local level. There again, you've got around about 80% of respondents saying that they fall into this category. And just in terms of salience, it's sitting at around about 22%. Then you've got those that are driven by empathy, right? That is the fourth cluster, right? These individuals, they fall into this group as they're concerned about others, right? Particularly the hardships that are caused by unemployment and homelessness and persistent inequality. And again, they, in their own little, circles, they also try to make a difference. They also sit at around about 18%. And in terms of salience or, in terms of salience or its contribution to this, to moving this needle, it's sitting at around about 13%. And then the last one is, this speaks to the middle class. These are individuals that are saying, look, we're doing our part and we are paying taxes. However, we're also feeling that we are being heavily taxed, right? So, and again, where government is failing in terms of providing services, so let's say security, you're finding that they have to now put in more money coming together in terms of creating gated communities and so forth. So that is a new type of kind of cohesion that we basically see come through. Of all these groups, we then asked one question to say then, what are your sentiments? Do you feel closer as South Africans, or do you feel that there is quite a lot of fragmentation, right? And the proportion, just in terms of those that feel that hey, you know what? We are actually we feel that we are closer. It has moved from 2022 sitting at around about 37%, and now it's sitting at around about 46%, right? So yes, we want to see it being higher, but as I mentioned, because of this multi-dynamic or this dynamic construct, which is social cohesion, to really get it up there, given that our lived experiences, they're so totally different. We're impacted by so many different things. And also where we come from as a people, just historically, we still have a lot to deal with, even when you're talking about issues around redress. 45% of our respondents, when asked, do they believe that government has got the ability to continue delivering on this project of building an inclusive society and a cohesive society? 45% felt that yes. And this came up from 2023, where it was sitting at around about 31%. So that covers now how we're looking as a people when it comes to social cohesion. And I think the one message that we can take from there is that, yes, we are a society that is in transition right now, and we are faced with a lot of challenges. But even so, despite the challenges and despite the headwinds, we are seeing this coming together, right? Almost reminiscent of the Rainbow Nation, coming out of 1994. In terms of active citizenship, I'm not going to delve too much into it. I'm just going to touch on the trends. And again, this was impacted. If you look at the period of around about 2018 to around about 2021, obviously there were quite a lot of fault lines. But coming out of 2021 to 2022, you're starting to see the index now starting to edge up, right? So from 58.5, it moves now to 61.5 in 2022. And 2023, it continues going up until now, where it's sitting at around about 64.9. And this really speaks to South Africans really taking responsibility for their circumstances. South Africans saying that we can also play a role in terms of defining our future. We do not need to necessarily wait upon the state. We've got each other, but also a partner in working with the state as we basically try to develop and move forward, right? Some of the critical clusters, I'm not going to go into the numbers specifically. I'm just going to touch on the various aspects of these clusters, right? So these individuals have got a positive and strong commitment to help others, standing strong on principles and with limited government interaction. That is the first cluster, right? Then the second cluster, community activities are starting. So these communities are starting now to take ownership of the issues, and they're starting to basically galvanize and to say, let's see how we can make a difference in our lives. They're still unorganized in terms of formation. It's not an NGO per se. It's just a loose social group that are saying, hey, let's even go out and start patrolling in our communities, right? The third one, well-functioning communities where interaction and mutual exchange between government and citizens are efficient. So here you've got, the ward councillors even operating quite effectively. The local government structure in that community is also working quite efficiently, right? And then the fourth one, it's mainly centers around personal networks, right, that have been established. So if I've got an emergency at home, I've got somebody within the next street or the street that I live on that I can quickly run into and basically ask for assistance. And then the last one speaks to a community which sees life as being hard, right? So again, affected by the socioeconomic issues that are prevailing, so criminal elements within the community, political and community fragmentation is quite rife. So here, this group, there's not a lot of service delivery that is taking place in these communities. Then just diving into national pride, we've seen over the last couple of years, it's just been going, it's really going through its ebbs and going up. And from around about 2023, we start seeing a difference. And with the GNU being established, but at the very same time, when you look at from 2023 to 24, This is the period where we were hosting BRICS, AGOA, for instance, and now also coming into 2024 with us, obviously the anticipation of us taking over the G20 presidency. You're seeing a sense of that national pride, obviously, now spiking up, right? On the cultural side, we've already touched on that. Besides music, on the sporting side, we had just also come off the back of winning the World Cup. So all of that was having an impact in terms of driving this sense of pride, or the national pride index basically increasing. So, as I mentioned earlier, when I started was to say, well, a lot has been said about us, and not by us. One of the key things that comes out of this study using our own proprietary segmentation model is to really say, yes, you've got, the demographic profile, you've got the age profile of these individuals, but are they coalescing around a particular identity in terms of who they are as a people or as a social group? So we have various categories, and I'm not going to touch on all of them, but I can just highlight some of those that are coming through that define, South Africans and, South Africans as individuals and South Africans within the context of community, right? You've got proud character supporters. These are loyal to the country in ways outside of the government structures and systems. They share a deep sense of appreciation of what it means to be South African. So again, these are the ones that would have said, I am a South African. You've got the positive enablers. These are the people who make it conducive for progress. They commit to improving circumstances and conditions for others in a positive way. You've got the uncritical loyalists. These believe in government structures such as the judicial system, health and governance system. They need and believe in government. So they really believe in the formal structures that are in place or the institutional framework of this country. You've got the activist supporters, and again, they must probably birthed by the historical and the heritage of this country in terms of where we come from, right? A complex group that has been a part of our behavioral expressions since 2017. They have sympathy for those that that are suffering, and they put an emphasis with those living in conditions where their only option is to protest. So they align with those that are suffering and are really facing hardships. And then you've got those that have got strong community networks, right? They've developed these into strong community bonds, working with one another to deal with challenges, and that often includes the ward councillor. So it's not only the community, but also the local government structure also is quite working well there. You've got the proud Democrats. Now they value the right to freedom of expression, to vote. At the very same time, also, they're active participants in society and also in the economy. And then we've got the celebrators of achievement, right? And as Brand South Africa, we also celebrate achievement. I think one thing about South Africans is that we, to borrow from Afrikaans, ons gaan aanmaak. We just got on with it. We pretend as if it's the feats that we basically overcome, or whenever we achieve something, we just make it as if, it's an ordinary thing. But, we really, really above. I mean, we punch above our weight in all respects. Cautious optimists. Now, these ones, again, they see the opportunities in the country. They see the policies and understand the developmental trajectory of the country, but are cautious about the future, given obviously the experience in terms of how they've experienced it or expectations not having necessarily been met, right? So just as I move to conclude on, just to give you the highlights on the study, the other aspects that we did ask our respondents on was their level of confidence about the future of the country, right? So 57% of them expressed, again, confidence in our health policies, the ability to work together as a nation, sitting at around about 55%. And that is quite significant. That came from around about 47% in the previous year. Then there's also government ability to do the right thing. we are now starting to see that confidence also coming through, where it was sitting quite low, right? It was sitting at around about 39%. Now it's starting to edge upwards, and it's sitting at around about 48%. Ability of political leaders to care and work together, also that it is improving. So just looking at this entire bar graph, what you're seeing from previous years, and this is really driven by this new sense of governance that has come through in the previous year, and also just in terms of the mood, the national mood, in terms of the countries trying to move in a particular direction with reforms, professionalizing of the public service, and just ordinary South Africans also just taking the baton and saying, we will also do our part. So just to touch on the health policies, yes, we've heard a lot, a controversial policy, which is the NHI. A lot are saying that they're expecting a quality of health services to be provided, that it will actually improve the quality of health services based on the as is to where we're basically trying to go. The NHI program will improve access to quality healthcare services. 63% believe that. There are those that believe that it will be effective in addressing healthcare disparities. And again, this does not delve into, the modalities in terms of how it will be funded. Before you can start implementing it, what infrastructure basically needs to be there. This really just looks at my current circumstance as a beneficiary. I must probably use a public facility. And I know that this policy is trying to put health services on a particular standard, and that will basically, which is maybe equitable to private healthcare. And for me, I think this is the right direction for myself and my community, basically. And then the last one that I'll just end on, Program Director, is where they see South Africa in the next 5 years, right? And on the whole, as you can see, there's a lot of positivity. Around about 68% of them basically said, look, we are moving in a positive direction. 14% said, look, it's a better place and a good place to be in. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think I will cap it here. We will provide the full study, also, which will be coming out with a short supplement in this coming week's Mail and Guardian edition. So with that, thank you very much, and looking forward to the discussion around some of these highlights. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for that, Lefenje. I think it's quite a comprehensive breakdown that you have given us there in terms of the study. While the team just sets up for our panel discussion, let me go ahead then and introduce you to our guests that will be forming part of this panel this morning. And the discussion, of course, will be based on the theme of this year's report, which is A Nation United in Advancing Solidarity, Equality, and Sustainable Development. So in no particular order, please allow me to welcome onto stage, well, she's actually going to be joining us virtually. That is Sanusha Naidu. She is a political and foreign policy analyst at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Sanusha, I'm hoping that you're going to be coming up on our screen any time now, just to also make sure that you are connected and you can hear us loud and clear. Also part of our panel discussion this morning is Sichaba Mutsilwa, who is Managing Executive at EmpowerWorks, Brand Marketing, Communications and PR. He's a highly accomplished leader in the fields of marketing, communications, leadership, and business strategy. He's going to be weighing in on some of these findings today. Jan Wechelen is Managing Director at Mark Data. Jan is somebody who has been at the forefront, really, of this research over a number of years, and hopefully he'll also be able to draw some of the insights in terms of what he is seeing as significant markers of either progress or even decline based on what previous studies have also unveiled. He's Managing Director of Mark Data And after more than 30 years, he's gained significant experience in social, economic, and behavioral science research across many markets. He's also a multi-award-winning researcher in many fields, including the development of entrepreneurial mindsets with the College of Charleston that won the 2018 Gen Compass Award for Research Champions in Istanbul. And last but certainly not least, forming part of our panelists this morning, Murendeni Lipadzi is an academic in the Construction Management and Quantity Surveying Department at the University of Johannesburg. He has a PhD in leadership development in the built environment. He's an academic and a professional. And of course, he shows a deep commitment to innovation, education, and research. So we have a very capable panel as part of our session this morning. I'm going to invite you all to please come on stage. You're sitting in the corner like, you've been put in there. It's not the naughty walk. If you can please come up onto stage. And as I said, how we'll run the session is that I'll give our panelists an opportunity just to share their insights in as far as this report is concerned. And then we'll also have the opportunity for you as our audience and delegates that are in the room to engage. You'll be more than welcome to ask questions and field some questions to our panelists, to everybody that is joining the session virtually. Please don't forget to post your questions in the chat group. That's where we're going to be keeping an eye on some of those questions. All right, is that my microphone? Thank you so much. All right. I think if we can just make sure that Sanusha is also up and that she can hear part of what is happening in the program. Sanusha, I'm going to just say hello. Please say hi back. We do have an audience in this room. We can't see you yet, but I'm sure you can see us on the live stream. Sanusha, good morning.
Good morning, Kathy. Yes, I can see you, and it's an incredible presentation. And yeah, we've got
Sanusha,
our
I can see you. I can't hear you. Just make sure you're not muted.
No, I'm not muted. I'm actually online. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right, here's what we're going to do, Sanusha. We're going to give the team just maybe a minute or two to work on that sound. We can see your picture though, clear quality, so I think everything should be good to go. Jan, I'm going to begin the first question with you because you are the man behind the research. You talk about 200 field workers that have basically gone out on the ground, gathered this data that has been shared with us today. I see that a lot of what is happening nationally. So some of the big conversations that will form part of the national debate feature quite heavily in this context. And I just wonder, what are the differences that you see there across demographic? I'm thinking, do South Africans everywhere in this country really care that much about the fact that Operation Vulindlela is taking off and running smoothly? Are they all watching keenly that the SIU is investigating and that there are progress with those investigations? Because it seems to me that a lot of the public perception is being directly influenced by some of the moves or progress in government or lack thereof. And I just wanted to get a sense of the level of real involvement in these issues.
There's a sense there's a perception we haven't experienced but the intention of it, how it is,
So you understand the sense that you get overall, is it that South Africans are more plugged in to what is happening in the country? And perhaps you're able to make a comment on that particular sentiment over the years. Because before people would casually say, if you're talking about the interests of a particular group, let's say groups in rural communities, they'll say, Gogo Mahlangu doesn't care about what made headlines tonight. She just wants to make sure that she's got access to water. Now, when I look at this research, it suggests that that's not necessarily true anymore, that somebody can't say that all she cares about is that she has access to water. There's a lot more awareness about the environment that is South Africa that I'm seeing reflected. I could be wrong. You're the expert.
No, you're absolutely right, and it is part. We are building towards the same thing. We are building towards a unified nation. We had a new start, and that's what we're building on. 2018 was, we see that the government, in terms of corruption and all of those things that started, seem to be moving in a different direction. And it felt like a sense of betrayal. It felt like, but we were all moving in the same direction, and now it doesn't seem to be. And that's why that 2018 decline is so incredibly sharp. And over the years, it started to rebuild. And as you can see in the latest one, particularly national pride has now shot up. So for the example of Gogo, having water may still be the physical need. But in terms of her thoughts about what South Africa is, what is it about this country that I like, what are the things that I hear in the news, her perceptions are shifting, even though the basic needs may still be what they are. And how these results indicate, these are not things you'll necessarily see on the street. These are things that are happening in people's minds about where the country is at. What does it feel like? What is it? Am I a little uncertain about the future? Do I feel safe? Do I feel as if political leaders have my interests at heart? Do I feel confident about the future and for my family? And will my kids have an opportunity? Those are things that people have in their minds, and this survey picks up the nuances in that and starts showing whether the nation is feeling more or less confident in whatever the context of the question.
Sechaba, when we look at how many South Africans or how many people which participated in the survey identified themselves as South Africans, that's sitting at just over 50%. And it does say to me that there is, of course, the reality of maybe being born in South Africa, living in South Africa, but that's very different to buying into the idea or the brand identity of South Africa. As somebody who's an expert in this field, when people are buying into brands, what are they really buying into? And if you were to give us your own analysis of what is happening there, why wouldn't automatically be 100% of those people that are part of the survey saying, well, actually, I also identify as South African?
Thank you very much, Kate. Yeah, now it works. It's a very difficult question that you ask. I think let's acknowledge that people are not slices of a cake. They are the whole cake. So one dimension can zone in on, say, I'm a South African, but we know within that it's nuanced. You can start anywhere in defining yourself. This one happens to be top of mind. Maybe it's the mood of the day when the question was asked, or that's what you generally feel. Or the messaging that usually will come through the media, where we are just grouped as South African in the messaging. For example, when the West sneezes and says, you South Africans, because that will have to be top of mind. But South Africans are very nuanced in the different layers that they identify with, their pronouns, as we spoke about also earlier. But I guess what is important is to say, ultimately, where do they feel the bond that pulls them together, that gives them a sense of comfort, a sense of belonging? And South Africa, in this case, as the research says, it is that bond that gives them a sense of belonging, not just the little groups, perhaps subgroups that one could identify with. From a branding context, that which you communicate out is what you believe you are. In other words, the packaging itself, in this way, South African, is an indicator of where the person sits. Because if they didn't want that to be the leading indicator, they would have used another one. So one has to believe it. The one thing that I appreciated about the study is that it's about South Africans talking about themselves, not being defined by somebody externally. So we're talking to real people as to how they feel about themselves. And if they identify with the brand South Africa, then that's a good thing to do. You might ask about the other percentage that does not start with South Africa as an identity. It could come as number 2. So it does not necessarily say then they don't completely identify as South Africans, just that it becomes the secondary thing that comes. There might have been something else a little bit more important. And also not forget that people are not averages. At the end of the day, what I appreciated about this study is there are substantive things and the feelings that people do feel that we must never negate. And in case I don't have an opportunity to make this point, because we consume so much media, it tends to tell us who we are. But with this study, this survey, we talk to people now and speak to them without being influenced by what they're hearing.
One of the markers that caught my eye, just again, when it comes to the identification and the characteristics of being South African, was, values. Often we talk about common values as a country and what is it that really brings us together. And I looked at it and there was, unity, there was hope, but Ubuntu was somewhere there. Now, I really want to know why that would be the case, because Ubuntu as a principle nationally internationally has its roots in South Africa. We are seen as the originators of Ubuntu. Archbishop Desmond Tutu, I think, would probably be turning in his grave to find that South Africans don't have the idea or the value of Ubuntu as a key identifier characteristic of what makes them South African. I don't know if that's necessarily good or bad, but it is just something that caught my eye. I see Jan also wants to maybe weigh in here, but Sechaba, you can go ahead.
Yeah, this one, it didn't surprise me. Because what we have done over time is to externalize Ubuntu and make it academic as an external thing. It was never defined because it is our being, our presence, and how we relate to each other in the environment and all that is. So that was the default. But what then happens over time is that because now you try to define it, and in the languaging that you use, context that you are trying to apply, then you also want to make it all nice and fuzzy and warm and feeling, and then almost not appreciate that even if we live together, there's always tensions and conflict that we have to, because of the proximity that we have. People don't live in those proximities now. We've got social media, we've got people who subscribe to other values other than that, and they take away from it to the extent that when you then say, do I feel a sense that I am one with my community? You'll see that your community becomes to be a little bit more dispersed, and it may not necessarily be what you have naturally felt and eaten and spoken about and seen in other people. Even if I was to greet you now, I'll greet you in English, but if I was to greet you in Sesotho, in the Dumelang, Lekai, Rete, in that prayer as a greeting, I acknowledge my being in the cosmos, my spiritual positioning in it, and then the fact that now when we engage, I'm present together with those that we came before me. So in that engagement, it becomes easy to be really able to appreciate Ubuntu. So that's why for me, it does not become a surprise as to where it lands.
Jan, did you want to add something in there?
And Sechaba, I completely agree with you. If you were to take any form of concern or goodwill or reaching out or thinking about the circumstances of others, if you were to condense all of that and say, well, this could be lumped together under that broad definition of what it would be enormous. But people don't necessarily associate with what they think or what they reaching or in their reaching out to others, wouldn't necessarily associate that with the term Ubuntu. But it is still what they do. That's their caring and reaching out to others. So one of the shifts starting to come through this year was those who are employed and have means of looking after themselves, but a growing sense about those that do not have the inequality. So you become more aware as you go to work or wherever you are, or the circumstances and neighborhoods that you move through, that I can look after myself, but I can't. I'm concerned about my fellow South Africans. I'm not necessarily sure what I can do about that, but there's a sense of concern about what would this mean for a South Africa. So in that context, as a practical example, one would consider that as part of the Ubuntu broader definition, but that's not necessarily how people see that.
Thank you both for those insights. Murendeni, when we look at what discourages South Africans the most, Lifenze in that presentation spoke about being caught between discontent and hope. And when you look at the key drivers of discontent, the items under that list are literally all things that can be worked on. They can be fixed. So if they service delivery, suddenly the discontent goes away. And I wonder then, in your view, what you think some of the lessons that we could be drawing out of a report like this in terms of what it really takes to fix this country. Because seeing it as simplistic as it is on that list, one thinks, well, actually, it wouldn't take a lot to get this country on a road that many South Africans would believe and buy into.
Thank you very much. I think from a point of the problems that we outlined, I'm not sure if I'm fine. Yeah, but from the problems outlined, I think we need to look at the leadership as one of the critical component for ensuring that such problems are solved. And I think even if you look at issues of load shedding, if you look at issues of your where people are not satisfied with their community leaders, it boils down to the structure in which the governance within our communities is. So currently we are within an environment of a democratic constitutional environment where we have to go through voting, where we have to vote for councillors. So even if you go as far as within the communities themselves, you find that there is a lot of unethical leadership, even at the core of the communities. And I think I'm of the view that even the study itself was interviewing communities within such areas as presented. And I think if we were to solve that unethical leadership towards authentic leadership, we are able to present leaders that are able to understand the problems, because it goes back to leaders, if they don't have context to what is currently facing them, they tend to not even solve those problems effectively. And I think just to shorten the answer, I would really boil down everything to the leaders we have within our communities.
Do you think that that's part of the reason why there is this confidence in the GNU, that because many people see it as perhaps a system that brings in more checks and balances in the system? One of the things that we hear the most is South Africans will say, no, it's good, you know, that there isn't one party there by themselves. They'll be held accountable. The others will expose what has been happening. Do you think that that is also part of what is showing these signs, positive signs?
Yes, so where I'm from in academia, if you submit an article, you get 10 reviews of 10 people saying different things. But I think from a point of adding input to the study in relation to GNU, I think one can say that when you are to evaluate that decision as well, one needs to also understand what is social cohesion in its entirety. In definition, it's unification, it's being one, it's being able to have the sense of belonging as well. And I think at the end of the day, when we define the outcome of the unity, we need to fully understand that that has been done. And I think we still have, I believe that even the structure at its current context, even though it's an outcome, there is still a lot of work to be done within the current framework as it is to ensure that we cover as many and unify as many people as possible.
Sanusha, let me bring you into this conversation before we open it up to our delegates. I'm interested firstly just in your overall impression of the findings of this particular report, because I think there'll be a lot of touch points, especially for somebody like yourself. So I'll give you a bit of latitude to go in the direction that you feel the strongest.
Thank you, Kathy. Kathy, thank you to the organizers and thank you to the.
Lucia, I'm going to ask you just to hold that thought for me for a second. I'm still having a bit of difficulty hearing you. Just give me a thumbs up if it's okay for her to go. All right. While they try and figure out what might have gone wrong between the last time you tested Sanusha and now, I'm going to perhaps bring it into the room. Can I please see the microphones? Yes. Yeah? Yeah?
Onto that.
Sure.
So just as an illustration of how quickly the nation responds. So I'm going to take you back to COVID. So you remember in COVID, we had these Sunday evening family meetings with Ramaphosa, who was making announcements of things and so on. And in relation to the monthly online surveys that BrandSA referred to, so we did that during that time. And I think we were bound to move from level 3 to level 4. And it was that Sunday evening, and the discussion or the decision was, no, we're gonna stay on level 3. And in the week after that, we launched the monthly survey, and it was, what do you think of government performance? And it was terrible. It was, they don't know what they're doing. Everything is a mess. All of those indicators now. Then that Sunday evening was again the family meeting. Yeah, we're going down to level 4. And shortly after that, we did another read. What do you think of government? Oh, they're all right. They're good. They're fine. So there are basic things that can really shift that. But the point I want to add on to that from this is we see the positive results from this survey in relation to the establishment of the GNU. But the caution with that is that hope is based on a very short lifespan. So it is vulnerable. And it is really about making sure that that hope is kept up and kept alive, because then you start building momentum on that. But yeah, a very good point to you.
Ian, you're reminding me of all the surveys that are conducted before elections, right? Where they emphasize this is a snapshot of this particular day and time. It is not a reflection or a prediction of the election outcome. So I'm hearing that disclaimer there in what you've just shared. So I'm just double checking. Can we get the microphones to the floor so that we can just get our delegates then to also ask some questions to the panelists? Let me start on the far left, my far left, which is your right of the room. Any questions from this side of the room? You all look like very intelligent people. All right, I've got one question on the left side of the room. If we can please just get a microphone to the second row, please. Ma'am, if you can please stand up for me. Remember, you're being live streamed. I warned you already. I told you you're going to be live. Yeah, there we go.
So I want to just understand what was your thought about it. So did I understand correctly when is it because Ubuntu has become unconscious? Like I don't have to think that I'm gay, that I'm a woman. So because it has become how we live, and that's why it didn't necessarily come out first on the research and the audience. So I think that's what I want to get clarity on, that because it has become Ubuntu, it's just how we live. We don't have to think about it. So when surveys like this come, people don't have to think about it, because that's how we wake up and that's how we think about the next human being. It's just how we are now.
All right, thanks for that question. Let me just see if there's anybody else in that section of the room before I come back to our panelists. Anybody else? All right, I don't see any other hand. Jan, you can go for it.
In on the slide that Lefense showed, where the I'm a South African was there. So in terms of which of these identifiers do you associate with, or which of them describe you as who you are, that describes you very strongly? And we have both statements there. I believe in the principle of Ubuntu, and I'm a loving and caring person. And I'm a loving and caring person for the longest time have always been stronger than I believe in the principle of Ubuntu, which is an expression of that character description, that we are loving and caring people, but through that is some identify with, yes, that also means that I believe in the principle. So absolutely.
All right, thanks for that. Sanusha, I understand that we now have you back up. I'm telling you, it's going to be a third time lucky, hey? If it's not, I might turn into one of those dishonorable people that says something and it's not really true. So let me give you a chance to come in and share your thoughts before we continue taking the reflections from our delegates.
Thank you, Kathy. I hope we're not on Betway on this third time lucky. The odds would be really great on this one. Can you hear me?
Sanusha, the CEO himself is standing up, so I think everything's going to be okay now.
Okay, lovely. Thank you
All right.
to you. Thank you to you.
Sanusha, I'm going to ask you just to continue to hang 10
Okay.
for us. Apologies for this. My head is really on the chopping block here. I do apologize to you and, of course, to everybody else for this issue. There obviously is something technically wrong there in terms of the sound to Sanusha. All right, sir, when I said on the left side of the room, your hand was not up, was it? I see you trying to sneak in a question. I'll take it because, of course, the next aisle is right next to you.
I think the survey doesn't really touch in depth on the issue of leadership the way I would have expected it to. And I think there's a different sentiment that many South Africans usually have, which is to say we work with what we have, but we also work with what we deserve. So in other words, the GNU, or if it was the GNU, it was something else, end of the day, we would work with what we have. I just want to know from your perspective with your leadership work, should we maintain and carry on to really just settle with what we have, or should we demand more as a society in terms of leadership? Because as much as we say, the GNU, we have, that's what we have, we're working with it. What's beyond that? When we look at the future, is it actually working? Do we need that kind of leadership? Does it actually resemble us South Africans? So just from your perspective, I'd like to know what you think it is.
Thank you so much for that question. In fact, when I was looking at some of the results, and as far as the sentiment that people express towards the GNU, I intentionally stayed away from reading that as a reflection of the actual GNU itself and its constitutional makeup, but rather as an indication of, okay, this is what we have and this is what people are feeling about it. But I think, yeah, you might be getting us into that point that I was avoiding. But Murendeni, you have to answer that difficult question.
Yeah, I think I'll answer it by saying that South Africa is a multi-national country, multipolar, with many different types of people. And I think such integration is critical for us to have government or leaders who represent the type of population we have. But from a leadership point of view, I'll take from the China template, if I was to put it. Even if you look into their general government, you tend to see they focus on merit when it comes to appointments of the leaders within such positions. For instance, one minister is a chemical engineer focusing on water affairs issues within China. So you get to see that even though those are political people in their nature, but in terms of leadership and what we are trying to solve, there's quite a lot of issues, triple challenges that we have: poverty, unemployment, inequality. Those things need people with expertise to be able to understand what they have to do.
Yeah.
And I think if we were to have such leaders within the environment in Cape Town, I think we would have progress in a way. I think you get to see that now with the ESCOM environment as well. How even if you were to engage those leaders in that entity, the sense of understanding of what they're really doing at that level. And I think if it was to even go further up to those that they report to, I think we'll see something different.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that's also highlighted again when it comes to what was found in terms of what leads to disconnect, that there's a sense that people are hired because of proximity. There's a great deal of nepotism. And so if you were to change that and make it be about capability, then even a marker like that would probably change over the years. Let me come to the middle of the room. Do you want to add something there, Jan?
Yeah, if I may.
Sure, sure.
Thank you. In terms of focus group discussions and other areas of work, is that people are saying, well, I can't do much about my provincial premier or at national level ministers or this or that. That's beyond my circle of influence. I can vote, and in terms of political parties and those kind of expectations, but as a citizen, my sphere of influence is in my community. And I can start building a community network that looks after those of us living in this community through the ward councillor, through different action groups in terms of safety and security, or making sure that there's a place for our kids to play, or however that finds expression in terms of these communities. And in the results, you see different layers of that, where you see communities that are very well organized. There's WhatsApp groups that keeps everyone informed. There's different action groups. There's meetings on a Saturday. There's discussion points, etc. Then you have groups that are beginning to adopt some of these principles, and you can see it's a little bit, sometimes it works and then it falls apart a bit and someone else picks it up again, and slowly over time it starts building momentum. And then you see, I think Lefense also mentioned that you see communities where it's just, there's almost a sense of, I don't even know where to start. Things are just really in a bad state. So you see those layers in South African society, and those where leadership structures have started was particularly after 2021 in the riots and looting and some of those communities dependent. And then from there on, it started to move into different areas of the country. And it's now beginning to really build momentum on it. So I think the leadership issue for most is expressed through my direct experience, because other things are just, it's just too far for me to be able to do anything about that. There's a sense of hope that it might change, or there's a sense of hope in the leadership to address these things. But it's very little for me to be able to do something.
All right, thanks for that, Jan. So Sanusha, we've tried to innovate here, and we're going to see if our innovation has worked. Please, you and I have known each other for years and we're very good with each other. So I know you're not going to hold today against us. Let me give you a chance then to come in, Sanusha. I will be able to hear you better if we have that microphone just by the headset, please.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Is that okay?
Sanusha, just give it one last try. No.
Sanusha, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, there we go. All right. Wonderful. Sanusha, you are in the room. Go ahead and give us your reflections.
Okay. Well, thanks, Kathy. And yeah, it's taken a while. So obviously, I'm going to be quite brief. I think for me, it's a very important study at a very important time in our political ecosystem. And more importantly, I think it comes from a perspective of what we are seeing within the country as opposed to what has been a kind of outsider perspective on South Africa. It did catch my attention to a large extent that the challenge around this kind of brand study is going to be difficult to extrapolate in terms of what does this mean for identity, but also how does this synchronize with issues around reconciliation? Because we're talking about the three pillars of South Africa around our national identity, our national pride, our social cohesion, and active citizenry. But at the same time, the question also becomes is how do people feel about this theme? And I hope I'm not echoing, so if I'm in an echo, just let me know. But what it does do is that it raises the question of how do you create transformation within the context of these three pillars? Two, how do you define what it means for who we are, but also those that have been waiting for the longest time for transformation and reconciliation? And the theme of solidarity, inclusivity, and equality talks to those issues of transformation. So where we are as a nation, how do you build social cohesion is more than just about, the idea that we have a South Africanness or who we are as South Africans. We first and foremost are South Africans, and then we have our other pronouns. But the issue really is on this identity of transformation. And it comes up in different ways within the context of the survey. Fascinatingly, the next 5 years for us is going to be critical for the next group of people coming into the political spectrum as first-time voters. How does this brand of a nation instill, infuse, and create that level of, the tension between the disconnects and what is the optimism or the hope? The second point to this is how it actually gets reflected. And I don't want to talk about globally, but how does this get reflected in Africa as this notion that we are an inspirational leader? be inspirational, but it also doesn't reflect in the practice on the ground. And there was one part of the survey when it looked at xenophobia. How do we deal with this? How do we ensure that we still the Africa we want? And there are tensions around that. So I think, again, what we're also beginning to see within the survey is some of the big issues that are basically underwriting or becoming more and more important and part of the global narrative that's also playing out in South Africa around who we are. And more importantly, how that plays out in how we relate across the border. And that's a critical space. The third issue, just to make around this question of, this idea that we have a brand and it's a brand to sell South Africa, is globally we in an existential crisis. And that brand to sell South Africa and how you instill investment confidence, how do you instill and infuse a national pride, means that you've got to link this back to who are our brand ambassadors outside of the country. Not necessarily those that go and get appointed to missions, but the brand South Africa that is outside of just the political leadership. Who is promoting our brand overseas? How are we promoting this brand? How do they take the results of the survey and include it into the way they speak about South Africa? And I think the biggest challenge right now is social media and where people are sourcing their information from and using that information as credible, legitimate information that they now taking into their everyday lives and using it as a basis to define our brand overseas. I'll stop there for now, Kathy, and we can go forward with other issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those reflections, Sanusha. I'll give you a chance to come in shortly, Murendeni. I just want to, because Sanusha, part of what you're saying is that perhaps there are other things that are also happening in this country that are not fully captured by the findings of the survey, but certainly as we look at part of granular or more specific questions they're revealing. And I looked at the markers around those that reported experiencing racism and experiencing gender discrimination. Both of them are very low. And yet, when we look at issues of gender in this country, it seems unbelievable to me that you could have those reporting gender discrimination to be under 20, and yet we clearly have the levels of violence and all forms of other discrimination against women, against children, and I think it's going in the direction of what you are pointing us to, Sanusha. But I want you to go deeper into that thought, because effectively you're saying that there might be an essence to the issues that we also face as a country that perhaps are not fully detailed in surveys of these nature, but it doesn't mean they don't exist. And therefore, they might also be a way in which we have to bring in those perspectives to have a much more complete picture of this country and the perceptions and experiences of people.
Indeed, Kathy, and I think you've
really eloquently in the way that you've characterized the issue. They're not fringe issues. They cannot be fringe issues for now in terms of what are the disruptors to our brand and what are the kind of dynamics or the incubators or the factors that are going to drive the brand going forward. Remember, we are also sitting in a society that is in a state of change. And your point about gender discrimination or the issue of just discrimination in terms of what's going on within the institutional architecture of the state is important. So, for example, if we have questions around gender discrimination, does that then make the survey more complex? because you're going to extrapolate a particular constituency within the survey sample who may have a different interpretation of how issues of political distrust or political institutional weakness is also linked back to leadership. You know, we talk a lot in South Africa about a 50-50% of gender balanced in terms of political policy making and representation. But we also don't understand that in a much more coherent, in a much more cohesive and a more deeper meaning, because it's not about an optics game. It's about what does gender representation mean in the context of leadership. At the same time, we don't have to only think about this in the context of political elitism. I think we need to look at it in the context of what is happening in communities where there are hierarchies and levels of different interpretations of what does it mean to be part of the South African brand. And the one point to make in this regard is I think the numbers are quite fascinating, or the percentages are quite fascinating, because you also got to look at the way the survey from 2017, based on the presentation that was done, that those numbers tend to dip at a particular point in the time frame. And you must ask yourself, what happens in South Africa economically, socially, politically, that informs when people start giving their responses? There could be a factor. So we go from 2017 and we go right down, I think it was around the social cohesion, from 2017 right down to around 62 or 3%. Then we start to slowly stagger up. But the point that you have to ask yourself is, what is happening in South Africa? What is going on politically in the ecosystems, socially, culturally, and how does that impact on brand? And so I think these are the dynamics going forward in the next 5 years, is who will be those drivers of our brand going forward. And most importantly, I think what we've got to be careful of is we're going to see a changing society. I think there was a study, or there has been some study, that what is important for us to think about is how many people within particular age groups, in terms of those that are basically on a social grant going forward, etc., how they maybe start thinking about us, about South Africa in that context, and who is now going to be our brand managers at the local government level. So the three pillars are not necessarily distinct from each other. If anything, they are interdependent on each other, because you've got to think about, in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going into local government election next year. How does this go forward? Because we had an election last year. There seems to be a cautious optimism around the GNU. But in this year, there's been tensions around the GNU with the budget, with regard to whether or not the increase on the social grant will happen, the VAT 0.5% increase. All of this may have different impacts on this kind of social cohesion, national pride, and active citizenry. And the other thing I want to make as a last point is, I think why you see some of the confidence around the NHI, etc., is there are people that are hopeful, because what they currently have doesn't give them that material circumstance to be able to access healthcare. So there's a hopefulness that the legislation will do that. Whilst on the other side, there are those that are fearful that it will take away their kinds of material circumstances around what access means under an NHI. So we've got that elasticity of tension in society as well.
Much for those insights. Morendeni, you wanted to throw in a word or two earlier, and so did you, Jan. So I'll start off with you, Morendeni.
Just wanted to add on a third point initially before a second comment. Speaking about how do we brand ourselves outside the country. I think the diaspora, if you look at the agenda 2063, they've named the diaspora as the sixth continent of Africa. So if we take that similar template as well, just to add on, even as brand South Africa, it might be a good option for that, whereby you are able to identify all the leaders outside Africa, out there, and then you use them to, or work with them to improve the brand. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Quite a few points have been raised, but I just want to try and summarize it in a way, almost from a psychology point of view. If you consider the nation being like a person, and the more uncertain you are, or the more unsafe you feel, or the more challenges you have on a daily basis, as you start reducing whatever else could be at risk in your life. In other words, your life becomes smaller. You focus more on immediate things, looking after your family, making sure that there's food on the table. What is the next thing to address? You disregard broader issues, even though they may be important to address, but those are not your immediate concerns. So a nation almost works in the same way. When there's confidence in how things work, when people feel secure, when there's a level of trust in how the system fits together, then you tend to expand your relation to others. And you can see that in terms of social cohesion. You start reaching out to others, you start building networks. In terms of active citizenship, you would be interested in starting to help others in a community through a church organization or this. When you're feeling scared or feeling frustrated or vulnerable, trying to help others through the church would probably be the last thing on your mind. You've got other priorities. And so the nation has a similar expansion, contraction type of reaction to how circumstances and conditions change around them. So in terms of just one of the points in terms of gender discriminated based on gender, that percentage is low. I totally agree with you. And I think there are perhaps experiences that, well, it doesn't help to talk about it. This is just part of how it is. This is part of the culture, etc., etc. Interestingly and almost counterintuitively is when you think that your world is now a little smaller because it feels unsafe and unsure or whatever, one would expect, well, then everything that's wrong should be formed now part of that conversation. But that's not the case because you don't have the emotional capacity to throw in all other kinds of social and dynamics that should also be addressed. So actually, the more confident we are in the future of South Africa and our leadership, and the economy is beginning to grow and unemployment is beginning to, the rate is beginning to come down, you have a better chance of addressing issues that may not be part of your daily conversation in terms of, well, okay, so how do we deal with xenophobia?
Sure.
And those other kinds of aspects, but the fact that a nation operates similarly to how we would in terms of feeling confident about where we're going, is absolutely, you can see that very clearly in the data.
All right, thanks for that, Jan. Okay, I've got a question in the middle, a question at the back. Yeah, and okay, I've got quite a few hands going up. Let me start just here with in the middle of the room, and then we'll get to the right side.
Yeah, thank you for the insights. And I really want to speak around that something and the insights that comes from your report. And comes basically as a question that the report seems to paint a scenario where there is confidence in most instances and other fields. Balance it against a country that is sitting with quite high unemployment. And I think for me, it's about sometimes when you ask questions, we ask people perhaps who are speaking from a point of privilege compared to those that are actually living these issues on a daily basis. The data from South African statistics, unemployment rate for white South Africans sits at 8%. The unemployment rate for blacks literally sits at 37%, which is 39.9. How do you then, in light of what has been presented, deal with situations where a normal household spending on a daily basis is around 230? With this high rate of unemployment, how do we then balance all these issues when high levels of crime, undocumented, foreign nationals, not only blacks actually, but right across, where heinous crimes continue to plague South Africans, and it is those that are at the periphery that continue to feel these issues. While the report points good progress and a pain sitting here of what a normal South African goes through, with just a few things that I've mentioned. How do we then find a balance? I'm actually picking your brain to look at those things and say, based on that, and I do understand that example that you went into, but given what we are going through,
Thanks for that question. So I guess maybe it's a feeling of disjuncture between what you would listen to on the radio and hear people complain about versus what is actually reflected in the report. Let me just take more questions. Yeah, let's take I'll take all three of you at the back.
Thank you for this interesting presentation. Just picking up on the point made earlier on, the data seems to suggest that overwhelmingly positive sentiment in South Africa. Are there deliberately questions not put forward to the audience that would bring about negativity or concerns about the future of the country? How is the survey structured in a way that those elements are mitigated? Because obviously, whatever we ask, we'll get those responses back. The second thing is, a lot has happened in the country since January. Do you feel the data is relevant considering the current foreign policy problems that the country is facing? And how would you package what was put forward at the end of 2024, I guess, to an international audience to dispel some of the statements and positions being taken about the country?
So basically the measures for bias, Jan, and the assurance that the CEO didn't come to and say, Jan, we need a good story to tell. So please make sure that you align it with the research. Yes, sir.
For this report. I think it helps in terms of the work that we are doing. We are responsible for social cohesion from the Department of Products and Culture. So also I was also worried with in terms of the misalignment between the findings of the study and also the aspirations of the majority of the people of South Africa. For example, if we look at social cohesion as a project, of course, civil society is involved and so forth. But if you look at social cohesion as a policy of government, it is a synonymous with transformation. So if you, it talks about issues of redress, it talks about inclusive inclusion. It talks about access to equal opportunities to children and so forth. So when then you are talking about the issues that seems to affect when it comes to social cohesion, it becomes a problem. And if we are talking about just issues of poor service delivery, corruption, and also load shedding and so forth. But then how about race as a factor in terms of our lived experiences? We've got issues of GDP. We have got issues such as race. I've already mentioned that land as well, is also an issue. So I think there is also a need to look at these things as well. And I can't help but actually think that this session should have happened before the launch of the report, CEO. I'm sorry about that, but I really think that maybe it should have started here before we actually launch the report. And the other thing is, when you're looking at the brand South Africa, I think the challenge really for brand South Africa is how do we tell the people what we are and also be able to tell them what we're not.
Yeah.
For example, you're looking at issues around national pride. When we are talking about national pride, we know that there are now people that are mobilizing about patriotism, around South Africa first, and so forth. Such that we've become sort of like a country that cannot accept someone who is from outside. So if I'm an investor looking at South Africa, how should I take that?
All right. All right. Thank you so much, sir. I'm going to take the last question in the front because I think it's the last hand that we have. And then our panelists will wrap up the session for us. No, not yet.
So looking at entrepreneurship mindset, young people with particularly in getting into entrepreneurship and based on the data that you look at in your research, are they interested in getting into entrepreneurship as South Africans and being proud and knowing that BrandSA has a back, and also as a South African, they know that they will get the support that they need in order to do that and create jobs. On Chava's point of view is how does then BrandSA support these entrepreneurs and help them understand as South Africans what we can do for you and help you grow your businesses in South Africa?
All right. Thank you for that question. Somebody earlier asked the question about ambassadors and who are the country's ambassadors. We do have one individual that could be a really good ambassador for entrepreneurship, but I don't know if he's the right person right now. Don't worry. I see you guys are still thinking about who that might be. I won't throw any hints. There is a South African who is a multi-billionaire, maybe one of the richest people in the world. Come on, guys, are you awake? Oh, you're half asleep this morning. That took a while. All right. Let me come back to our panelists, and I'm going to ask you all to please keep it as short as possible so that we can also wrap the conversation up. Sichava.
Let me go in. Thank you. So I just want to make 3 quick points. From a brand building, no brand is ever built on negativity, no matter how big the negativity is. You look at the positive aspects of your brand, and then you grow those. If there's dirty water, you put in clean water. Over time, the sediments will go down, and the clear water will come through. The negativity provides the context and the tensions that we have to work with as we build the brand. We are a young country with a lot of people whose hopes lie in front of them, and they have to innovate from where they are. Innovation that solves societal problems, causes commercial interest, is the one that is sustainable. A lot of South African youth in the forum from EmpowerWorks that we also go and curate do want to have a future that they themselves can define on their own terms, knowing very well that a lot of people have given us the country that we have today. Some had to die, some had to suffer. So how do we build from where we are? It does help when you have a strong brand like Brand South Africa as a country. When you innovate that, then you are able to have access to markets, so that when we talk about proudly South African products and solutions, we are able to export those. Of course, there is one or two exports that you spoke about now that we may not necessarily at this point in time be proud of, but young people then will have access to those markets. That's why we need to have a very strong brand. Ambassadors. We at an individual level are ambassadors of this country. If our mindset is cemented in the negativity, in the things that are distractions, that's the ambassadorship that we take forward. That's why even when we go to our places of worship, places of engagement, we carry ourselves to those places. So let us be our first ambassadors of the country in the perceptions that we have of ourselves, of our families, of our communities, of our country, of our continent, as our nation, of our humanity. And that's the contribution that South Africa for a long time has always meant, giving of humanity. And I think that could be
all right.
Strongest ambassador.
Jan, very briefly, please.
Yeah, and thank you for all the questions raised. It is, when you work through the data, and it's a data set of over 900 variables. So what has been shown is a very small snapshot of that. But coming through COVID in 2020, 2021 started to reconcile in 2022, the uncertainty in 2023 around the elections coming up and all the media reports, etc. And now after the election, the announcement of a GNU is almost the first time in quite a few years that there is a shift. So you see that positive energy coming through and the sense of hope. But you also see indicators in the data of saying, do you trust the political leadership? Nothing has really changed in those indicators. Are you concerned about the unemployed? Nothing has changed in those indicators. Yes, we are still unemployed, but we are still concerned about the unemployed. If you look at the active citizenship, who those involved in active citizenship activities, there's a high percentage of the affluent that give money towards those initiatives. And so when you talk about unemployed and those that are employed and who's involved in the activities to support others, there is a collective. There is the collective of who we are. Yes, we have issues to address. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Sure.
But that is based on the design. And then the last point I want to make is, since 2017, the methodology of the approach has been kept consistent year on year, so that the change that you see is not based on how the survey is designed, but on the actual impact that it is showing. And this is our survey. We do political polling, and we've got within 2% of what the IEC results were, based on the very same design as what this is. So it is what we do in terms of national service.
So I guess part of the point there then, Jan, is that a 2-hour session like this is never really enough to fully capture what it is that researchers like yourself do. In fact, you're probably saying, you see, this is why I need the whole day to unpack my research, not just 2 hours, Lefenje. I certainly hope that it has helped in answering some of the questions. Please, let's get that report to everybody as quickly as possible, so that we're also able to look at some of those markers that have raised some of our eyebrows or even got us asking more questions. Let me thank my panelists for this morning. I'm going to squeeze you in. We're about to be cut off the live stream.
To respond to the other two colleagues there, I think all that government has to do is to just and I think with the help of BrandSA, is to further reinforce the current reforms that are there and ensure that they implement them. I think you're looking at the NHI, the EWC, and the Bella. I think if government have placed that in place, all that BrandSA and all the other subsidiary institutions should do is just to ensure that they're implemented. Thank you very much.
As best as you could in 30 seconds. Hey, all right, please let's give our panelists a warm round of applause as they make their way back up. While they do that, I'm going to invite back on stage the CEO of Brand South Africa just to give us his concluding remarks for our panelists or for our conversation today. And Sanusha, we're going to courier your gift to you, so don't worry. You may not be in the room, but your gift will definitely reach you. Mr. Neville, you want to come and give your concluding remarks quickly, please?
Thank you very much. Let me take this opportunity to, first of all, thank Mayor and Guardian for the partnership. It is a big round of applause. Part of what we like to do as BrandSA is not to keep the information quiet, but to take it out there so that everyone has access to this information. And Mayor and Guardian to have said to us, listen, don't do it alone, do it with us. We use the same media that we also criticize. In this instance, they are coming forward and saying, this is good information, better share with the audience. Thank you. Thank you so much. And the chairman is here as well. Thank you so much. Please give him a big round of applause. Panelists, or in fact, let me thank BrandSA and your team for the study. There's more that we need to do with the study. Indicate that, but thanks to the team from BrandSA, like the research team, please give them a big round of applause. Panelists, Sechaba, Jan, Sanusha, thank you, and I apologize for the sound earlier. And Delhi, thank you so much. Please give them a big round of applause. You can see what we did was we did not put government there. Because if we had, I know what the response would have been. So kudos to the research team for ensuring that we don't have people speaking there. Otherwise, definitely we would have been slaughtered. Kathy, thank you so much. And this gift is for you. Let me do that now.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Sorry for the impromptu photo shoot, guys.
Thank you. Kathy has always been a brilliant moderator, and I had the pleasure of working with her when I was in my old job in KwaZulu. Where you're just dumping money for nothing. So for us, this is quite critical to ensure that we utilize the results of the survey. It's a survey that gives us an indication of how we need to drive the brand and the symbolism of our country. We take the suggestions in terms of what could be perceived as limitations in terms of the survey, but the survey is designed, and I'm glad Jan clarified it, that we haven't changed anything. I know the message that was almost coming out was like garbage in, garbage out. But if you look at the years, the last 8 years, you see how it has actually been moving on a cyclical basis. And you can actually see that the responses are not exactly the same, because if it was garbage in, garbage out, it would be almost standard for the last 8 years, where you'd be getting similar results every year. In this instance, you would have seen a decline, you would have seen an upward swing in terms of how the respondents have been responding to it. And I'm going to need to be very careful how I say this, that sometimes we tend not to always believe anything that is positive that we hear. And we need to, again, just be a little open-minded in certain instances. I'm not saying don't criticize, and that is why there's always reviews. That's why we have these sessions. But sometimes when it says to you, actually here you're improving, we need to embrace it and say, right, how do we ensure that we keep in that same trajectory going forward rather than regressing? Because regressing is not good, but any improvement is good improvement. Sometimes us as South Africans, we tend to shoot ourselves in the foot. And I think the question that Kathy raised about our ambassadors, and the messaging that came out really is quite clear that we are our own country's ambassadors. We don't just rely on the diplomatic ones that are appointed, but we are the ones that are meant to sing the praises and to speak on behalf of our country. And if we don't defend our own country, somebody else is going to drive the narrative for us. We would have seen how some of our ambassadors have gone out to the global world really echoing negative information about our country. And if we don't stand up for our country, that message will continue to resonate all the time. What is also quite clear, Lifenj, is that we need to now drive over and above the BrandSA survey. We need to now encourage perhaps our minister, who will obviously have to lead this with the president, in terms of a nationwide survey that includes all the departments, because that is where all the sentiments, I think, Ugogo or etc., those would need to be amplified, because our survey is not meant to be dealing with social ills, etc., although we highlight those. Ours is about where are we as a country in terms of our nation brand, and how do we continue to improve the promotion of the brand. But we need to understand what the South Africans are telling us, and the sample size, and if you look at who was surveyed as well, as articulated by Jan, is not necessarily always inclusive of just those that would be specifically in the lower LSM. I just want to find at the end just to indicate and encourage everyone to embrace our flag, our South African flag. And you see this in most markets. And I just want to give you 3 minutes why it is so important to really embrace our flag. It's a symbol of our national identity. It represents our history, our nation, and our values. It really encourages unity and pride, and we see this more so when we win the World Cup, and then everyone really wants to embrace the flag, but it needs to be an everyday occurrence. It represents sacrifice and struggle, many who have fought for our country, and we need to remember that. It represents our ideals. It embodies principles like freedom and justice. Our cultural and historical significances are also embodied on the flag. And most critically, global recognition. At one stage, especially in the early days of South Africa's freedom, the South African flag was the most recognized in the world. Wherever you went, as soon as somebody saw the flag, they would automatically say, South Africa. And we need to get back to that. And I know that is my task, to make sure that the flag gets to that same status again, where it is truly recognized in every circle of the world. It has dipped a little bit in the last few years, and there's no reason why we shouldn't amplify it again. At the moment, the most recognizable flag, because of the tensions in Europe, Ukraine flag is sitting right there at the top, but it's because of the natural issues between itself and the Russian Federation. Us, we shouldn't be driven by a crisis. We should be driven by our patriotism and our love for our country. I thank you.
And Neville, thank you so much for those concluding remarks. In fact, as you talk about the flag and how we need to be promoting the flag a bit more, you remind me of a country like Namibia. You don't go 2 kilometers in Namibia without seeing their flag. It's everywhere. Shopping centers, it's on the trolleys. And I saw that and I thought, why don't we have this in South Africa? You need to see the flag everywhere because it does instill a sense of pride. It does instill a sense of, well, actually, this reflects me. It represents me. So yes, a very big yes to more of the flag. These days, the only place you find the South African flag is if you're going to buy it, and then you must still go find it at China Mall. You're not going to find it at Mall of Africa. You're not going to find it at Sandton City. You literally have to drive out to all the China Mall centers you can find, and that's where you're going to be able to buy it in bulk. I hope that doesn't reveal too much about what else I do when I'm not on the stage. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for your time and your presence at this launch of the Brand South Africa report. I think the message has been clear. It has been very much a call to action, and it's about each of us how we respond and take up that call. On that note, it's a good place to wrap things up for today. Until the next time that we meet on this very platform with the Mail and Guardian, please do stay tuned to be part of the conversation and look out for the social media updates on when next we're going to be bringing you thought-provoking conversations that help to set the agenda in as far as where this country is and most importantly, where it is that we're heading. On that note, we'll call it a wrap. For everybody that is here in person, lunch is going to be served. If it's cocktail lunch, please don't hold it against me. It's lunch nonetheless. So all of that will be happening to your left. You'll just walk straight down the very same place where breakfast was served. That's where you will find lunch. Don't just run off, please. Hang around a little bit. Let's chat, let's network, and then we'll call it a day from Constitutional Hill. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.